Leading doesn't mean that I'm in charge and I make all the decisions. Leading, again, is this idea, what can I do to make those that are in my primary
Mhm.
relationships and I'm creating conditions for success for them. It's not
Yeah.
about, here's the thing, I need you to help me get to there. Leadership is not, in my view, and this type of leadership is about, am I making those around me successful?
They may have told you to go to the big city, chase the busy crowds, find the bright lights, but no, you chose your own path to stay right here. I'm your host, Claire Bouvier. Welcome to the Small Town Entrepreneur Podcast, where opportunity is just on the other side of the door. Welcome to the Small Town Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Claire Bouvier. Myself, I am so pumped. We have Dr. John Conrad with us today, talking about something that maybe isn't as sexy as we think about marketing and sales funnel and AI, but is essentially the foundation for all good business is leadership. So I'm so excited to jump in and share this conversation and looking at the work that he's done and all the experiences he's worked in navigating the leadership space and how we can build better leaders in today. So let's jump in and let's talk to John Conrad. Welcome to the Small Town Entrepreneur Podcast, Dr. John Conrad.
That's the best intro I've ever had.
Great. I'm glad that I got to do it for you. I wish I could have gone longer, but welcome. We're
Yeah.
going to do, the audience has just heard a little intro on the
Yeah.
incredible work you've done, but we're going to dive in today and look at leadership. And it's funny because the podcast that I have created talks a lot about sexy topics that people love to hear about. Is AI going to replace you? What's the top things you can do in marketing in 2024? But it's funny, as soon as we start talking about things like leadership, they're not, that's not the clickbait today. That doesn't disrupt the noise. So let's disrupt today and talk
Okay.
about why leadership is across every sector in every part, from academia to the business worlds to our education systems. Why is leadership so important?
I, for me, I think, I view the words innovation and leadership as synonymous. I don't, they require the same things. They require us to be able to understand someone, be able to influence others, be able to solve problems, deal with conflict. I think on the leadership thing is, I think most people think they can lead, right? If you've got a title, so if you're a manager, you say,
Yeah.
well, I'm a manager, so I must therefore be able to lead. And but I don't think that's the case. And so, when I talk with innovators and they've got lots of ideas and they're saying, well, I'm an innovator because I have ideas. And I think, those two things, in the sense of, I'm a manager, so therefore I can lead. Have ideas, so there I can innovate. Well, we know that both of those things are false,
Hmm.
right? That just because I have a title or I create ideas doesn't mean I'm actually capable to do what's needed to do all the things to actually have it come to fruition. So both leadership and innovation are movement things. They're action. We're trying to move from A to B. We're trying to transform. We're trying to grow, and to do that requires a lot of day in and day out work. That's not sexy. It's not exciting. It means you have to come in and talk to people and understand who they are and what are they going through today and what are the challenges? Are they on their game? Are they not on their game? What can I do to help them? What can I do to increase their chances of success? I have to be able to deal with conflict, like real conflict. Like people, we're going to have disagreements, and people don't like that, right? I've got a
No.
real good background in dealing with conflict, but I don't enjoy it because it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? So leadership, the pieces of leadership people like, and the pieces of innovation are what people see and going, well, here's the product, here's the thing, here's my team. But I think good leaders and good innovators, their work is lonely, right? Because
Yeah.
it's hard. And so that difficulty of, well, how do I've got to go to Claire and I've got to say, hey, Claire, I think that idea is wrong, right?
Shots.
Yeah. Right. But that's
Tell
uncomfortable
me
for people.
why.
Well, but again, some people don't receive that well. It's
Mhm.
really hard, right? So
Yeah.
I think those are the pieces there that around leadership, the why it's not, we look at these theories and we look at this, and that person's a good leader, but we don't see the day in and day out muck, dirty stuff, right?
Yeah.
The behaviors that have to be demonstrated consistently all the time that can be alienating, can be lonely, can be isolating. But if you persist and you're able to do it, can then see over time and like, oh yeah, that person's a great leader. Not realizing it took them 10 years,
Yeah.
right? Of just
Yeah.
things that no one notices, right?
Yeah.
And then they get there and it's like, wow, look at that team. They're so high performing. It's
Yeah.
like a light. Everybody thinks it's a light switch. Oh, that's easy to do and turn on and off. And from my experience, it's a lot of grind, right? It's like getting in
Yeah.
shape for a race. No one
And it
sees the miles you put in, right?
no, no, those quiet moments trying
Yeah,
to mull over something. And it's
yeah,
interesting because we all can think of a time, whether it was a ridiculous summer job
right.
or, in a big company, we all know the repercussions of really poor management, poor
Yes,
leadership. We don't need to go into those.
yeah.
So, what are some of the unique tactics or principles or strategies to foster innovation, healthy innovation as a strong leader?
Yeah, I think some of the things I've done and just, based on what I've read and based on theory, but also based on just practicing
Yeah.
I think leadership is how do I get people to see the same vision or destination? Right? It's not so much, people go, "Oh, I agree with the vision, I agree," but actually to see it and feel it and live it, you have to have some ability to influence others, right? And I think influence doesn't come from carrots and sticks necessarily. I think those are needed. Yeah, you have to have some sort of obvious incentives for people. But
Yeah.
I think really, when I look at the teams that I've had and had great success, it's empathy, it's kindness, it's compassion, it's gratitude. Those things are much more durable from a relationship standpoint and influencing standpoint than, you know what, Claire, here's $1,000. I need you to do this. So you may do that once and here's the transaction and you're fine with that. But
Yeah.
you're not caring about me. You're
Yeah.
like, yeah, and you can do great work and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. But for me to come back to that and you'd say, well, you know what, John, like, yeah, that was great last time, but this time $1,200. Right? But I find if I'm caring and I'm compassionate, I know where you're sitting and what you're living and what you're going through, and I'm trying to, look out for your success. The dollars somewhat, I don't say they're irrelevant, but they become less important.
I agree.
So that empathy, kindness, compassion, gratitude, those are things that you can influence on that are sustainable and durable. And I look at my network. And I think, I always say to people, it's not the Rolodex and how many are in the Rolodex. It's how quickly do people respond when you send them a message? Because
Quality
it's
versus
about me and
quantity.
them. It's about I help them at some point. And it's not that they feel guilty. They're like, I want to help John.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They want to see me successful. And I think so probably for the last 15, 20 years, I say this with every team, my job is to make you successful. Right. That's my job as the director. Make you successful. And they're like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. I said, what depends what you need. And so I spend time the basis is I need to know who people are. I need to know,
Yeah.
what are they struggling with, what their competencies are. I need to allow them lots of lane, lots of freedom,
Yeah.
lots of risk taking. And when it screws up, I'm the one who's accountable, not them. And that's hard for people is, if Claire, you and I were working together and you're doing something, I give you the runway and you fail, then it's me who has to be accountable. Doesn't mean you're not accountable, but it's me as the boss who takes the heat,
Yeah.
not you. Right. And that
Yeah.
that requires a lot of trust and a lot of things, right? So
It's funny that you say this because I remember I was a waitress, a server for like
yeah.
9 years. And it's funny, at the end of the day, like I'm just delivering whatever came out of
Yep.
the kitchen. And whatever I put down in front of them, I take all the heat. And I
Yep.
remember, oh my goodness, the best learning I have ever had in any job has been waiting tables in
Yeah.
restaurants.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
every time you have to win them over in the course of a meal, whatever it is.
Yep.
Now, you talked about, I really like that what is success for that person, because it's true. For some people, their need could be monetary, their need
Yep.
could be having some, fulfillment in the career, whatever it is. Now, it's interesting because we've seen post COVID, the it's funny. I had another conversation with someone on the other side of the world, same struggle, cannot find strong workers, no matter how small or big the company is, really struggling either
Yep.
retention or recruitment. And it's interesting because, as we know, change is constant, always moving, and especially in leadership. Is this a problem in leadership? Or and maybe I'm kinda going outside the
Yeah.
lane here, or is it what's happening in the world right now that we're seeing such a s we're struggling for getting people to come and join our teams, so to speak?
Well, I think there's two things. So one is,
Yeah.
I think, you know, so take this notion of supervision and management out of it.
Yeah.
Good leadership is difficult, but also I think good leadership is all around us. There are people doing things, and sometimes they don't call it leadership. They don't call it those things. But I think where the struggle is on one end, people, if I, this it's this merge between, I think people don't want to be in charge anymore, right? Like,
Well, but why?
well,
Too
because
much work?
I mean, there's a lot, like, so I think of, if I were to if I climbed the ladder in within the organization, right, and I moved from a director to a VP, or the level of discourse, just like there is in everything in the world, becomes more significant. And
Right.
like, who would want to put up with that, right? Like, if I was a VP or a president,
Yeah, that's
why would I want to deal with that stuff, right? Like, it's just constant discourse, right? And it takes away from the things that you want to do, right? The things that you're good at. One is, I think that sort of eliminates some people from moving up in an organization, but it doesn't eliminate leadership necessarily. Like, those people still have great leadership skills, right? I see in our organization, there's a lot of great leaders, but actually have no supervisory responsibility. They don't crave that, right? But
right.
but they are out there driving change, driving innovation, driving success with others. So I think that's one thing. The other part around talent is, you know what? I don't think we believe you need to believe in someone. There's a lot of stuff around here around the vicious and virtuous cycle, and that if I believe in someone's ability to be a superstar, just simply my belief, I can improve their performance by up to 30%.
Oh,
Just
gosh.
simply from a
Yeah.
belief, not actually
Yeah.
doing anything else other than,
Yeah.
Claire, if I think you're a superstar and I
Just tell
keep
me I am, okay?
you are a superstar, right?
I humility, eh? Let's
Yeah, I
talk about
know.
that.
But you see it, right? When you look at your children, you believe in them, it does drive their performance. And if
Yeah.
the opposite is true, when you don't quite believe they're a superstar, it doesn't mean you're being mean or nasty to them. But if I don't believe someone is capable,
Yeah.
even though I hire them, well, they're never going to be capable, because all we're doing is looking for things that reinforce my belief system, right? So I think the same is in leadership. Is so when I hire staff, yes, I look through the technical and I look through this, but at the end of the day, I'm going, is this a person that I believe in, right? And if I go into the mindset of, yeah, maybe they're not perfect at doing this thing, but I believe they can be, and I believe that that gives a lot of people confidence. I look back at the people who've believed in me.
Yeah.
Wow, like, it's
Yeah.
transformative, right? And it's
I
not.
agree.
And I've also had the opposite where, they didn't believe that I was good, and
Yeah.
but it wasn't about performance necessarily. But there was always this, the way they would question you would be like, wow. So then I started getting in my head,
Yeah.
going, oh, okay, I better do it better. And then you do it again, and it's like, well, you forgot this, you forgot that, and it
Huh.
just becomes this cycle,
I
and
agree.
they're hard to break out of. So
I
so I
agree.
think, when you go to hire people, yeah, I don't know if maybe there's a talent gap, maybe, I don't know, right? Like, when I look at I have no problems recruiting people and hiring people, because I think people want to work for me,
Yeah.
right?
I will
So, right, so I
I
sit here
do
and I'm like,
know
yeah,
people
it's
in
all
your
good.
network. I can vouch for that.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yes.
people want to work
Yeah.
for me. I get often saying, John, what's it like to, how do I get to work in your department? Right. But I think that comes from years and years and years of, building your reputation, but it's built on it. The word of mouth business is the best business I found,
Mhm.
is when someone brings you up in a conversation that has nothing, you're not even there part of.
Yeah.
And then they see them later and they go, oh, yeah, I was just talking about you. And blah, blah, blah. Awesome. Right. And now, like, yeah, it becomes probably grander than it really is, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other side of that is true. So yeah, I think there are certain skills that are lacking, but I think when we hire, we also believe I want to hire something and I want them to just go do their thing. I don't want to have to worry about them.
This
Like,
is true.
I want them, good leadership. I hire someone going, okay, where will they be? Can they take over my job? Where will they be in 5 years? Yeah. Like, yeah, there's technical things and no one's perfect. And but if I find some inner drive in that person, some way to pull that out of an interview process, that these people, there's something there. There's that
Mhm.
je ne sais quoi, that thing. It's hard to define and grasp and write. And then I get jazzed about that, right? Then I'm able to go, oh yeah, this is a person I can build a relationship with, and this is a person I know if I give them the right amount of autonomy and responsibility, and give them enough runway, and give them enough support, within 18 months, 20, 24 months, I just sit back, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
good, dust my hands, off we go. So when I hire, I'm not thinking about the duties as much as thinking about, is this someone that fits, or someone that is able to drive themselves with the right support? Well,
I
now
yeah.
in the work I do, that may fit. In other work, it may not fit. But even when I used to hire faculty, I always said, okay, well, what are they bringing? And the interesting part of this is, and I ask, when I make decisions, when we're down to the final sort of straws of making decisions, I don't sit there and I go, well, what do can they fit into my team? I'm like, what are they adding to my team?
Right.
Like, it's
Yeah.
not about fitting my culture,
Yeah.
right? And I think sometimes with employers, they're like, well, they have to fit with me. And I go, good leaders are the ones who adapt and are malleable,
I agree.
not the employee. Like, I'm the one who has to be adjustable, not them,
And
right?
I think that's where, the change is always happening because
Yeah.
you're building on that. Now, it's interesting because a lot of our listeners, you'll be like, "Well, this doesn't relate to me. I don't need to worry about,
Yeah.
leadership because I'm just the leader of myself. I just sit in
Yeah.
my basement and work on my business and the odd time I go out and about." But
Yeah.
can you speak to the
For sure.
solopreneur, the person that doesn't have, you know, maybe the autonomy you're talking about or the opportunity? What is
Yeah.
leadership for them?
I don't think it's any different. I mean, this idea of that I'm only a person of one, right? What about your friends, your peer network, your relationships, your business relationships, your suppliers, your customers, all of those things, you can lead within that environment. And leading doesn't mean that I'm in charge and I make all the decisions. Leading, again, is this idea, what can I do to make those that are in I'll say my primary
Mhm.
relationships, and I'm creating conditions for success for them, right? It's not
Yeah.
about, here's the thing, I need you to help me get to there. Leadership is not, in my view, and this type of leadership is about, am I making those around me successful? So if I'm a solopreneur and
Yeah.
I'm like, I've got a thing I sell, okay, great. But if you're only viewing transactional,
Yeah.
it will die at some point.
And I agree, and that leads
And that
totally.
could be a good business model. Create something,
Yeah.
sell, done.
Yeah, the
Fine.
drop
No, it's it's
shipping.
it's not a moral issue. It's just this, yeah.
It's
But it
it's yeah, what you've
but
designed.
but transformation doesn't happen without leadership.
And ultimately, that's what really building to
Yes.
me, I would say building a business is what problem are you solving?
Yes.
And what will be the transformation with the solution that you're offering?
Yeah.
And in that case, so it's interesting because when it comes down to it, it's really creating strong engagement. You've
Yeah.
built very high performing teams,
Yeah.
and you've talked about giving them, the
Yeah.
autonomy, the empathy. Is there a certain, when you're building these teams and they're going off on their own, is there anything in particular that you've done that has been really successful?
I don't give people work, I give people problems. Maybe that. that can be taken home. Yeah, here's another problem for you. But
No, I know, I like that.
yeah, but everything's framed as a challenge or a problem. My job is I don't want them just coming up with a solution,
No.
right? I want them, yeah, so if I say here's the challenge, whatever. So we've got these assets at work and we're like, okay, how do we make more money off of these things that we have, right? So I could simply go to the person who's responsible and say, oh, go to the school board and do this, this, and this. And they'll do it and they'd be perfectly happy doing it, right?
Yeah.
But to me, then I'm just doing their work, right? Like there's no transformation happening. We're just, again, transactionally mindset. But if I said, you know what,
Yeah.
we have this asset, we could use this to engage people. Like think about how we can use this thing and engage as many different people as we can, right? And think about that problem as a first problem. The second problem is, well, then how do we make some money off of that, right? But if I
Yeah.
simply said, we have this asset, go make money off of it, I think limits because it narrows our mindset to say, well, it has to be revenue generating. So when I think of the work we do, sometimes engagement generates opportunity that makes the money. So it's not the asset that's making me the money. It's the asset being used for engagement purposes that creates an opportunity for some other source of money to be generated, whether it's a grant or whatever, right? So I think it's being able to be broader in the thinking. So to me, I think that's one thing. Is the other thing I think I do is when people come back to me. So when my staff come to me and say, I've got a problem, they have to
That's
have
what I wanted to ask.
they have
How
to
do you
have some
do?
ideas with them.
Okay.
Because I might, they were saying, well, John, I can't do this. And I'm like, okay. And then they're looking for me for an answer. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Right? You have to come and say, here's the challenge and problem. Here's the things I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And then my job is I say this all the time. When you're done a conversation with me, when you work for me, I should leave you with more questions than answers. Because I think questions are the juice, are the fuel,
Yeah.
not answers.
I completely agree, which is why
I don't know.
I was the kid in school asking too many questions and it didn't
Right.
serve me, but
No, but that's again around when you think of leadership, it doesn't necessarily, there's not a reward for those behaviors in most of our structures, right?
no.
So asking questions, I ask questions here all the time, and it's seen as you're challenging, you disagree.
Yes.
And partly I'm trying to understand, but mostly I'm going, I think there's another opportunity here. But because I'm asking questions, my head isn't around what that opportunity could look like.
Right.
Right.
No,
And
and
so, yeah.
Okay, so sorry, I interrupted
That's all
you,
good.
but you had said something.
Yep.
I'm really good at that too.
Yeah.
You had said something too, you're put in a tough position a lot
Yep.
to essentially figure out, what is the best way to move forward. You're always caught, especially working in the academic world and working in small
Yeah.
businesses and in the innovation sectors. How do you balance, by taking those risks, creating that innovation, but also, you have that fiscal responsibility, you have these
Yeah.
other practicalities. How do you balance that when dealing with these tough decisions?
Yeah. So partly I think it's just a natural mindset well, I've worked most of my career in education. So in education, we have constraints that we can do nothing about,
Yeah. Fair.
right?
Yeah.
So when you accept that, then I don't spend time trying to address those constraints. Right. So when something comes up here and I find not just with new managers, but when we're faced with an organizational challenge and a problem, right? And then people are like, oh, well, we got to do this, we got to do that. But we're tackling the same constraints that have existed since my time in education, which is over 30 years, probably pre-existed me, probably goes back to the first creation of a university.
Yeah.
There's some constraints around education, right? That doesn't mean they're not solvable. But they're very immovable, right? So I just automatically, yeah. Can we not let's go to the space where there are no rules and there are no.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
that's the natural ability for me to go, yeah. I get we only have so much money. I get that we have a rigorous budget process. I get we're accountable to governments. I get all that, right? So when we face an organizational problem, we're like, oh, only if the government would change could
Yes.
we do this?
That's
Right?
you're
Well, we
playing
can't
victim
change
to the
that.
crutch. Yeah.
It doesn't matter who I vote for. it's not going to make significant change to the way we deliver education in Ontario. Right.
I love that way you said that though. Find the space where you can play
There's
and
more.
yeah.
I remember one of our registrars saying, "John, you're a rule breaker." And I said, actually, I'm not. And he's like, "Yes, you are." And I go, "Well, what rules have I broken?" And he's like, "Well," I go, "No, I follow the rules, but where there are no rules, yes."
Yeah.
Right. And he's
Yeah,
like,
and that's
because it feels like
awesome
I'm breaking the rules, but I'm
because
not.
no one has thought of it.
No one has tried, right?
Yeah,
Now
that's
you
cool.
have to run, like I have to run my business. I have things that I have to run that we have to
Yeah,
meet our expectations,
the
right?
checkbox. Yeah,
Right. And you got it. This idea of innovators not being practical, I think that's another trap, right? Like
yeah,
innovators aren't just about ideas. Like people go, "John, you're just so creative and you're just so this." I'm like, yeah, but I get my work done, right? Like
You execute.
I execute.
Yeah,
You gotta do management work. I gotta build a plan. I gotta build a budget. I gotta
yeah,
sign the agreements. I gotta do all that stuff. But I do that very quickly,
exactly.
right? Like do the
Yes,
stuff I
yes,
don't like very quickly,
yes.
and then I can be creative. But the creativity comes through, again, going back to this idea of leadership, because I talk to people, even my staff, they're my biggest source of inspiration. It's not, yeah, I read things and all that, but it's listening to someone talk about what they're doing at work that
Yeah,
really triggers my brain, right?
yeah.
Um,
I think that is so cool, and that's gonna really resonate with me
yeah,
forever because I kind of
yeah,
err on the line of, where can we explore? But I think it's true is like find the spaces that no one has explored and disrupt it in the way that you
yeah,
can that works with you. Okay, so we have just a couple little more
yep,
questions
all
here.
good.
But what would be after 30 plus years and just you are an incredible leader
Yeah,
for the spaces you're in. Say whoever you are, you're entering a very difficult situation. You have a tough situation. Do you do a pros and cons? How do you approach? I know I'm kind of like, but like, what's the practical if I'm sitting here and my anxiety is just taking me over because
yeah,
I don't know how to go about it? You're getting in your head. What's the Dr. Conrad
yeah.
approach?
Two things. So one is when I face a problem, I don't sleep.
Yeah.
Right? Probably like most people. I either that or I wake up and then my brain starts, right?
Yeah.
And what I've learned probably in the last 10 years or so is to really realize and going, the minute I take an action toward that problem, doesn't matter how small or how big, I feel better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just need to take an action. And
Yeah.
I've done some things to protect that in the sense of I don't check email before I go to bed. Like I go home, I shut off.
That's smart.
Right. And then I get up in the morning and I start early and then my brain starts going and then I start, but sometimes there's things that happen at the end of the day at work and I go home and it's hanging on, right?
Yeah.
It's hanging on. And it's just like, because I didn't get a chance to do anything about it.
Yeah.
I wake up and it just rolls and rolls and
Oh,
rolls. And it causes stress and anxiety. And it's not
it's
good for me.
horrible.
It is. It's a horrible feeling. Right. And I think then the minute I go to work and I'm like, okay, whether it's an email, whether it's a
Yeah.
note, whether it's a research, whether it's just that one action, I feel that it just dissipates, right?
Yeah.
Because I've initiated something. And I think where for me is I'm less concerned about resolution.
Right.
I think where people go, they want it resolved. They want it
No. Yeah. Yeah.
clear. To me, it's about movement toward mutual understanding.
Or just movement in
Just
general.
movement, right? Like
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
momentum is an understated thing in our organizations.
Yeah. I agree.
Like sometimes you just
Yeah.
need to get started and
Not even, yeah,
education
just that
just
first thing
yeah.
will,
There's
yeah.
there's all kinds of behavioral psychology out there around, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, right? Like just this,
Yeah.
there's lots of theory and lots of science out there that supports that, and for me, it wasn't because I read a book in science. It's just like, oh, why do I feel better today than I did
Yeah.
yesterday?
Yeah.
Right. And so I've really got into asking myself those questions, like, how am I feeling? And
Yeah.
I'm not the most empathetic person. Like I would say I'm compassionate, but I'm always not good at feeling what other people feel. It's
That
not a
yeah, I
naturally
can
natural state for me. And I'm not always good at interpreting my feelings and trying to attribute where their sources are. But I have found, probably since I've had kids, having to be more like, okay, because I can be pretty direct and blunt and just like, yeah, like whatever, right?
I
You
can
know,
relate.
my kid will be sick and I'll be like, whatever, you're sick. Like, get up. Like, right. And they're looking at me like, John, I just
Uh,
need a hug,
you're
right? And
my
I'm like,
dad.
just go to work, right? Like, whatever, you're sick.
Yeah.
Blow your nose, right? But it's caused me stress because I'm feeling guilty and I'm feeling like I did.
Yeah.
So then I'm trying to go, why am I feeling off? Like, why?
Yeah.
And so for me, again, the art of questioning myself without an expectation of an answer
Or resolution.
makes me feel better.
I love that. And it's so true because that first step, I find the anxiety can increase and
Yeah.
increase until you take that first step. And we all have those things like maybe
Yeah.
a bill that we keep putting off,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
even if you can't pay the bill, I've been in
Yeah.
situations, oh my gosh, starting a business,
Yeah.
it was just calling up the lender or whatever, being saying, listen,
Just be transparent. This
yeah,
is
like I just need to talk about it. I think that gap between the problem and the first step is where the most damage happens. And I say damage as in
Yeah,
we
but you
get
think
into
about
it.
that think about that relationship you just talked about as saying, I owe a vendor money. Think about it from the vendor's perspective. They just want to know,
Yeah.
right? They have all kinds of people that stiff them. That's part of the nature
Yeah.
of being a supplier. Like someone at some point doesn't pay. But what drives them nuts and doesn't cause them to sleep is they don't know.
Yeah.
They want to find a solution. Now, you're going to find some that are just mean and fine. Doesn't change anything. You still owe the money. But someone's going to be like,
taxes.
right? Yeah. At some point, though, it's most suppliers are going to be like, "Yeah, we've been there." Like,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they'll thank you for telling me because they're now making assumptions of why you're not doing something. So you're
Yeah.
making assumptions about why they're also making. So now we've just raised their anxiety. So this mindset of if I'm concerned about their success, what am I going to do?
I agree. And
Right?
these
I'm going to pick
assumptions
up the
can,
phone and I'm going to say, sorry, here's what's going on. Can we jump on a call? And not, yeah, you can do it by email, but the idea of having this conversation,
yeah.
we're just humans. We're just people and it's just work,
Yeah.
right? There's so much more to life. And I think, the joy for me in work is the people. Like I
Yeah.
love producing results and I love having great stories. And those are all just examples of the work that we've done because we are good people to each other. Right.
I I agree. We have a guest coming on in a couple weeks, Ryan Alford, and he said, it's not B to B, it's not C to C, it's not B to C to F.
Right.
He's like, it's H to
The
H.
age.
It's
Yeah.
human to
Human.
human. And that resonates.
It is.
You're like, yeah, let's stop. Like, why are we changing the conversation if we're, B to C? Like, it is, we're a human, you're a human. Let's rip the Band-Aid, fail fast. Let's talk about it and move
Yeah.
forward.
And I think part of that is the other person, like, I think we start assuming that, again, going back to this, so my background, how I really, I think, got into leadership to the level that I'm at is because I was forced to deal with a lot of student conflict. Like I lived in student residences for 14 years.
Oh, no, you
Yeah.
didn't.
Yes, I did.
Okay, that's not on your LinkedIn profile.
14 years living in student housing, right? And now I was managed. So most of that job was conflict ridden. That's all I was doing.
Oh my
Right.
goodness.
So when you're living there, especially as an adult, it's different when I was 20 and
Yeah.
living in residence. But I was 30 or older, living in residence with 17-year-olds, and I'm the one doing the discipline. So I had to see these people in discipline meetings, then I had to see them in the cafeteria. If I could not come up with a way to resolve that, that would have been miserable for everybody. Right. So for
Wow.
me, it really became down to this thing about, well, what's the goal? It's conflict is always future focused, but we spend so much time wanting to say, well, it's whose fault is it? Yes. I'm
Yeah.
not saying don't look at the fault, but we spend so much time wanting to assign blame
Yeah.
because then it makes we think it makes me feel better. But blame doesn't make anybody feel better. But it's like, yeah, what happened? Okay. What are we doing forward? What are we doing forward? And I remember dealing with students and they'd say, well, I'm worried about how this, they would say they own the problem. I'm worried about how this will go going forward. And I said, I will judge you on your next behavior. right? So I think I've carried that
Okay.
into business and say,
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. We all screw up. And maybe I'm too naive and people go, well, what happens if they take advantage of you? Yeah. I've had
Well,
people take advantage of me. Absolutely. But you know what? It's not about them, right?
yes.
So why am I going to change my outlook on life because someone takes advantage of me? I've had people take credit for my work. I've had people get promoted because of work that I've been part of. Yeah, it doesn't bother me, but I've gotten to the point of like, I don't care, right? Like I care about, do the people who know me, are they like, do the people that matter to me, do I matter to them?
Yeah. I
Right.
think,
And
yeah.
and you know, maybe it's just my upbringing, forgiveness is really important for me. Redemption is really important for me. All those things are really important to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, I don't like getting taken advantage of. Do I get mad? Yeah. Do I confront it? Most times I confront it. Do I
But are
care?
you awesome? Yep.
Well, I think, again, I think part of the lens of, when you're a parent going, well, my wife and I always joke, it's about, we're not raising children, we're raising adults.
Yeah.
Right? So
It's
so
true.
how do I want my kids to behave as they get adults, become
Yeah.
adults? And so that's always been my lens, is saying, okay, well, there's things that are good and there's things that are bad in life, but be respectful even if someone's not respectful to you. It's about how you feel about yourself, not how others treat you sometimes. And maybe that's naive, and maybe,
Well,
because
no.
whatever, I don't know. It's just, and maybe it's a rationalization, but I have found in the work I do, treating people well has generated more work. My team has more work than we know what to do with, and we don't sell. We don't put ads out. We people call us. They want to work with us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, small business owners may have a thing they're selling. At the end of the day, people just want to work with you if you're a good person. And maybe it's not the thing you're selling. Maybe you have to sell something else. But if you're a good person and you treat people well and you're willing to have difficult conversations and you care about the future, I think good things will come. Maybe not on the speed you want them, though. As you're a living example of that, Claire. Right?
Well, you know what's funny? I I was listening to a podcast and someone was saying, oh, yeah, you're so lucky, like such great overnight success, and she laughs and she says, "Oh, you mean the 10-year of me
Yeah.
sleeping in my car overnight success?"
Yeah.
That was Canadian singer Shania Twain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's true. And it's funny that you bring this up, and we'll wrap up here. But I
Yeah.
was actually, of course, in the shower where all the great thoughts, as cliche as it is, it really is true. I was thinking, and thinking about leadership and what that means for the world and the future for, people building out great products and services in the world. And it's funny because I was thinking, success, if it came too fast and too quickly, you wouldn't have enough troubleshooting time. Like
Right.
you didn't have enough time to, and I say troubleshooting, I work too
Yeah.
much in technology, but
Yes.
solving the problem, figuring out even the fact of like what we're talking about when you're anxious about something, just movement. And if you got success and you listen to people become really successful actually too fast, the demand is too high. They can't do it. And eventually they're back at square one trying to start again.
Yeah.
So slow growth is, even with an ADHD brain, I find slow growth in that respect, I think is okay.
Yeah. So I have a friend. He's like, I hate the term serial entrepreneur. I'm like, why? He goes, serial entrepreneurs to me have never succeeded. They got to a point and then they got rid of it because they couldn't scale it, grow it. And I'm not saying everything needs to be scaled or grown, right? But the relationship pieces become too complex, right?
Yeah.
Like the world we're in today, yeah, there's complexity because of technology, there's complexity, but I still think the complexity of our world is the human complexity. That as humans, we're becoming more complex. There's all these things affecting us as people, and we're not spending enough time. Well, who are you? Like,
Yeah.
what's your story, right? Who's missing from the conversation, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's that, and again, people go, well, perspective taking doesn't necessarily take a lot of time, right? Sometimes you just need to sit back and go, what voice is missing, right? Like, what perspective is missing? Who should I talk to? I I find like I chat with people all the time, right? Like, my wife sometimes gets a little annoyed. I'll be in the grocery store, and so again, I don't actively go out and look for conversations, but there are times
Someone
when I'm like,
showing them a picture of
you
their
know,
dog on their phone.
my favorite time at the school here is the first week of school, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody's lost.
Yeah.
And so whenever he's lost, I get to help them,
Aw.
right? And we have a map outside my office, and I hear
Yeah.
them pointing on the map, and I'm like, oh, I got free time
You're the
because I asked
Walmart
them.
greeter.
I am. And I just say, oh, what are you looking for? And then I ask questions, right? So being curious about someone, being comfortable with the uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and all those things. But I think that, I have this deep seated fear that no one will show up to my funeral, right? So
Well,
I'm like,
I'll be
well, hey,
there.
well,
I'll
thanks,
I'll make
man.
sure I'll be there, okay?
Good. But it's
Bring
it's
my
that idea of
family.
did I, the impact I make at the end of my life is the relationships, right? Not the things I created. It's the people in my life will carry my legacy on, not the things I made. Right. And so I'm really driven by legacy. And to me, legacy is people, and people is leadership. If you have a desire, be curious about people, leadership will come out of that.
I agree.
You don't have to be my type of leader. You don't have to be your type of leader. Just be you and talk to someone. If you're introverted, we'll find one person to talk to. You don't need to talk to 100, right? Like you can
Yeah.
still lead. You can still make those around you successful. So if leadership is an uncomfortable word for you, go, what can I do to make someone else successful?
Yeah, and that's what
Yep.
leadership is, and yeah,
Yep.
well, it's funny you said this because 5 years ago, I wrote my obituary. That was an exercise, and then I met
Nice.
my husband, and I made him do it because I said, "You know, what's the next 50 years? Let's jump
Yeah.
there, and then
Yeah.
let's work backwards."
Nice.
Yeah, I know.
I'm assuming his date is yours is longer than his, right?
That's why it's the Twitter versus blogging.
Right.
He's got the tweet, I got the blog.
There you go. And
Obituary,
you
yeah.
need both of those in your life, right?
I couldn't agree more.
Thanks,
Dr.
Claire.
John Conrad, you are a gem.
Thanks.
The world needs more of these conversations. We need your voice out there more. I am excited for the world to hear this episode. It's given me a lot of thinking to do and how we can all be leaders in this next generation. It's so important. As much as I love AI and marketing, who are the leaders in the space that are moving it next?
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure anytime.